accomplish them when you did take your children's lives?
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
God would take them up to be in heaven, is that what you mean? All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think would happen to them?
If they would have continued stumbling.
And where would they end up?
Hell.
What's the problem? I just needed to come. Is your husband there? No. So what's the problem? I need him to come. I need to know why we're coming, ma'am. Is he there standing next to you? She? Or me? Are you having a disturbance? Are you ill or what? Yes, I'm ill. You need an ambulance? No, I need a police officer. Well, send an ambulance.
The house was quiet when the call came in. At 9:48 a.m, a dispatcher in Houston picked up the line. On the other end, a woman spoke in a calm, steady voice. No panic, no confusion. She gave her address clearly. Then she said she needed the police. When asked what was wrong, she did not hesitate. "I just need a police officer." There was no noise in the background, no crying, no movement, just silence. Minutes later, officers arrived at the home on Beachcomber Lane. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house looked undisturbed. The television was off. The kitchen was still. Nothing appeared out of place, but the air felt wrong. The woman who made the call was standing there. Her clothes were wet, her hair damp. She didn't try to run. She didn't resist. She simply waited. Upstairs, the officers found them. One child in the bathtub, 4 others placed on a bed, covered. Everything about the scene suggested order, sequence, intention. There was no sign of struggle, no forced entry, no chaos. Only a methodical pattern that raised a question investigators would struggle with from the very beginning. How does a mother arrive at this point? This is what we know. Andrea Yates was born in 1964 in Texas. Early accounts described her as disciplined, intelligent, responsible. She excelled in school and later trained as a nurse. By most measures, she followed a stable path into adulthood. In 1993, she married Rusty Yates. Rusty worked as an engineer. He was described as quiet, reserved, and deeply religious. Together, they built a life centered around faith and family. Their beliefs were strict, structured, focused on traditional roles. Over time, they had 5 children: Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary. The family lived simply. At one point, they chose to live in a converted bus, before eventually settling into a house in Houston. Andrea stayed home to care for the children full-time. Rusty worked long hours. From the outside, the family appeared devoted, close-knit, grounded in routine. But beneath that surface, something had already begun to shift. In the late 1990s, after the birth of her 4th child, Andrea's mental health started to decline. It didn't happen all at once. It came in episodes. Periods of withdrawal, long silences, moments where she seemed disconnected. Then it escalated. She was diagnosed with postpartum depression, later postpartum psychosis. These are not minor conditions. They can distort reality. They can create delusions. They can lead to thoughts that do not align with the real world. Andrea's symptoms became severe. She attempted suicide. She was hospitalized. Doctors prescribed antipsychotic medications. At times, the treatment worked. She stabilized. She improved enough to return home. But the pattern repeated. Improvement, decline, hospitalization, release. Each time, the episode seemed to come back stronger. At one point, her doctors issued a clear warning. She should not be left alone with the children. That warning would later become one of the most discussed details in the case. Because despite it, life continued, the family moved forward, and Andrea remained the primary caregiver. In November 2000, Andrea gave birth to her 5th child, Mary, not long after her father died. 2 major events close together, and both had a profound impact. Her mental state began to deteriorate again, this time more rapidly. She became withdrawn. She stopped speaking at times. She refused to feed herself. She showed signs of severe depression. And then the delusions began to take shape. They were not random. They were structured, rooted in religion. Andrea began to believe that she was a bad mother, that she had failed spiritually, that her children were not safe. Not physically, but eternally. According to medical records and later testimony, she believed her actions could determine their fate beyond this life. The thoughts were not grounded in reality, but to her they were real. She was prescribed Haldol, a powerful antipsychotic medication. During this period there were signs of improvement. She became more stable, more responsive. Then, in early 2001, the medication was discontinued. The decision was made by her doctor. The reasoning? She appeared to be doing better. What followed happened quickly. Within weeks, her condition declined again. The symptoms returned, more intense, more fixed. She became preoccupied with religious themes, with punishment, with failure, with the idea that something irreversible was approaching. Rusty Yates was aware of her condition. He had witnessed the hospitalizations, the suicide attempt, the warnings from doctors, but he also believed she was improving. He returned to work. The routine resumed. Andrea stayed home with the children. There were moments that stood out. She stopped interacting normally. She avoided eye contact. She would sit silently for long periods. At times, she appeared detached from her surroundings. At other times, she expressed thoughts that didn't align with reality. Still, there were gaps in supervision, short periods where she was alone with all 5 children. Those moments would later become critical, because one of them was approaching. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, Rusty left for work. His mother was scheduled to arrive later that morning to help with the children. This arrangement had been put in place to ensure Andrea wasn't alone for extended periods. But there was a window, roughly 1 hour. Andrea was alone in the house with all 5 children. There were no visitors, no interruptions, no one else inside. What happened during that hour would define the case. But before that moment, the warning signs had already been there, repeated, documented, and observed. The question investigators would later ask wasn't just what happened that morning, it was whether it could have been stopped before it ever began. And, as the timeline narrowed, one detail stood out more than the rest. She had been told not to be left alone, but on that morning she was. And what she did next would leave no room for doubt about her state of mind. Only questions about how it had gone this far. The house remained quiet after Rusty left. There were no phone calls placed during that first stretch of time. No neighbours reported hearing anything unusual, no interruptions. Just a single hour where Andrea Yates was alone with her 5 children. Investigators would later reconstruct the sequence based on her statements and the physical evidence inside the home. It began in the bathroom. Andrea filled the bathtub with water. There was no sign of haste, no indication of panic. The scene suggested preparation, deliberate action. The children were in the house, moving between rooms, unaware of what was about to happen. She started with one, then another. Each child was taken to the bathroom individually. There were no reports of loud struggle, no signs of forced restraint beyond what was necessary. The evidence showed a pattern, repeated, controlled, and uninterrupted. After each child stopped moving, Andrea carried the body to a bedroom, placed them on the bed, arranged them, covered them, then returned to the bathroom. The process continued, 5 times. The order of the children became an important detail in the investigation. The youngest, Mary, was among the last. The oldest, Noah, was last. That detail would raise questions, because by the time Noah realised what was happening, the pattern had already been set. There were indications he may have tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Inside the house, the sequence ended the same way it began, in silence. When it was over, one child remained in the bathtub, the others were in the bedroom, placed side by side, covered. The water in the tub had turned still. Nothing else in the house had changed. The kitchen was untouched. No broken furniture. No sign of chaos. Only a completed sequence. At 9:48 a.m, Andrea walked to the phone. She dialed 911. Her voice was steady and clear. She gave her address without hesitation. There was no confusion in her words. No attempt to explain, just a statement. Then she called Rusty. She told him to come home. She did not give details, only that something had happened. When officers arrived, Andrea met them at the door. Her clothes were wet, her hair still damp. She did not resist arrest. She did not attempt to flee. She did not ask questions. Inside the house, the officers began to move room by room. What they found confirmed the call. In the bathroom, the tub still held water. In the bedroom, 4 children were laid out on the bed, covered and positioned. The arrangement was deliberate. Everything pointed to a sequence that had been completed without interruption. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of another person, no indication that anyone else had been involved. Andrea remained in the house as the scene was processed. She did not deny what had happened. She acknowledged it repeatedly. At this point in the timeline, one detail began to stand out to investigators: her composure. Witnesses described her as calm, not detached in a way that suggested confusion, but controlled, present, able to answer direct questions. That detail would later become central in court, because it raised a critical question. Did she understand what she had done, or was she acting under a belief that disconnected her from reality? As officers secured the scene, Rusty arrived. He had driven back after receiving her call. What he encountered inside the house would later be described as devastating. He had known about Andrea's condition. He had seen the hospitalisations, the medications, the warnings. But the events inside the home that morning had gone beyond anything previously observed. In the hours that followed, Andrea was taken into custody. She was interviewed. During questioning, she did not retract her statement. She confirmed what she had done. She described the sequence, step by step. There were no contradictions in her account of the physical actions. But there was something else. Her reasoning. It did not align with the reality of the situation. She spoke about her role as a mother, about failure, about consequences that extended beyond life. According to investigators and later court records, her explanations were rooted in beliefs that did not match the evidence or the world around her. That disconnect became the focus, because the facts of the case were not in dispute. 5 children had been killed inside their own home by their mother. The question was not who, it was why. And more importantly, whether she understood the difference between right and wrong at the time she acted. Before moving deeper into the investigation, there is a brief pause. Cases like this reach people in different ways, depending on where they're watching from and what they've experienced. It's always interesting to see how far these stories travel. Then the timeline continues. As the investigation progressed, medical history became central. Andrea's records were extensive: multiple hospitalisations, documented diagnoses, postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, suicide attempts, prescriptions for antipsychotic medication, warnings from doctors. One line in particular appeared repeatedly in testimony: she should not be left alone with the children. That warning had been given more than once, and yet, on the morning of June 20th, she had been, for approximately 1 hour. That hour now stood at the centre of the case, not just as the time when the acts occurred, but as the point where intervention might have been possible. Investigators also examined the decision to discontinue her medication. Haldol had been prescribed, a strong antipsychotic. Records showed that while on the medication, she had shown signs of improvement, more stable behaviour, reduced symptoms. Then it was stopped. Within weeks, her condition declined again. That timeline raised further questions about treatment, about monitoring, about responsibility. At the same time, Andrea's religious beliefs became part of the investigation. Witnesses described her as deeply committed, structured, guided by strict interpretations. But during her decline, those beliefs had shifted. According to testimony, her thoughts became more rigid, more extreme, focused on punishment, on moral failure, on consequences that extended beyond life. Those beliefs would later be examined closely in court, because they were tied directly to her stated reasoning. By the end of the initial investigation phase, one thing was clear: there was no mystery about what had happened inside the house. The physical evidence matched her statements. The sequence was established. The timeline was confirmed. But the motive, and her mental state, remained unresolved. And that uncertainty would define everything that came next. Because when the case moved into the courtroom, the focus would shift. From the acts themselves, to the question that would decide her fate. Did Andrea Yates know what she was doing was wrong? Or was she operating under a belief so distorted that the law would view her actions differently? The answer to that question would divide public opinion, challenge legal standards, and ultimately reshape the outcome of the case. By the time the case moved into court, the facts were no longer in question. 5 children had died inside their home. Their mother had admitted to it. The timeline was clear, the sequence was established, the physical evidence matched her account. What remained was a single issue, her state of mind. In 2002, Andrea Yates stood trial for capital murder in Texas. The prosecution did not need to prove that she committed the act. That part was already established. Their focus was narrower. They argued that she knew what she was doing was wrong. Under Texas law, that distinction mattered more than anything else, because even severe mental illness does not automatically remove criminal responsibility. The legal standard was specific. Did she understand right from wrong at the time of the act? The defence built its case around her psychiatric history. They presented medical records, hospitalisations, diagnoses, postpartum psychosis. Expert witnesses described her condition in detail. They explained how psychosis can distort reality, how it can create fixed beliefs that do not respond to logic or evidence. According to their argument, Andrea was not acting out of anger, revenge or personal gain. She was acting under a delusion, a belief that what she was doing was necessary. That belief became central, because in her own statements, Andrea had explained her reasoning. She believed she was a bad mother. She believed her children were not safe in a spiritual sense. And according to testimony, she believed that by ending their lives, she was protecting them from something worse. Those statements were not disputed, but their meaning was. The prosecution approached those same statements differently. They pointed to her actions after the killings. She called 911. She reported what she had done. She called her husband. She waited for the police. To them, this suggested awareness, an understanding that her actions had consequences, an awareness that what she had done violated the law. One detail in particular was emphasised: she had locked the door. Investigators testified that after the killings, Andrea had secured the house before calling for help. The prosecution argued that this indicated planning, control, awareness. To them, it suggested she knew what she had done was wrong and was managing the situation. The defence countered. They argued that behaviour alone does not define mental state, that a person experiencing psychosis can still perform structured actions, can still follow sequences, can still speak clearly, but remain disconnected from reality in a critical way. Expert testimony became a central part of the trial. Psychiatrists on both sides offered opposing interpretations. Some described her as severely psychotic. Others argued she retained enough awareness to understand right from wrong. The jury was left to weigh conflicting professional opinions. At the centre of all of it was a single, difficult question. Not whether she was mentally ill, but whether her illness had crossed the legal threshold. As the trial progressed, public attention grew. The case was widely reported. It raised uncomfortable questions about mental illness, about responsibility, about the limits of the legal system in cases like this. There was no clear consensus. Some believed she should be treated as a patient. Others believed the severity of the act required accountability under criminal law. As the jury prepared to deliberate, the outcome remained uncertain. Both sides had presented evidence. Both had argued their interpretation of the same events. And now the decision would come down to 12 people. This is the point where cases like this often get reduced to headlines. A verdict, a sentence, a simplified conclusion. But the reason these timelines are broken down in full is because the details matter. Without them, it becomes easy to miss how decisions are actually made. And in this case, one detail in particular would shape everything that followed. In 2002, the jury reached its verdict. They rejected the insanity defence. Andrea Yates was found guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. The jury had the option to impose the death penalty, but they chose not to. The decision immediately sparked debate. Many questioned how someone with such a documented history of severe mental illness could be found legally sane. Others argued that the standard had been correctly applied, that the evidence showed she understood her actions. The case did not settle into resolution. Instead, it intensified. Then, 3 years later, something changed. A detail emerged from the original trial, one that had not been fully examined at the time. During testimony, a key prosecution witness, psychiatrist Dr. Park Dietz, had made a statement. He suggested that Andrea may have been influenced by a television episode. an episode that depicted a mother drowning her children. The implication was that she had drawn inspiration from it. There was one problem. The episode did not exist. When this was discovered, it raised immediate concerns because the statement had been presented as fact, and it may have influenced the jury's understanding of her intent. If the testimony was incorrect, then the foundation of the verdict was in question. In 2005, an appellate court reviewed the case. They focused on that testimony, its accuracy, its impact, and whether it had affected the outcome of the trial. The conclusion was clear. The conviction could not stand. Andrea Yates's guilty verdict was overturned. A new trial was ordered. The case was reset. The facts remained the same. The events inside the house had not changed. But the legal process would begin again. And this time, the question of her mental state would be examined under a different light, with new scrutiny, new arguments, and a renewed focus on what had been missed the first time. As the retrial approached, one thing became clear. The outcome was no longer certain, because the same evidence could now lead to a different conclusion, and the question that had defined the first trial remained unanswered. Did she truly understand what she was doing? Or had her mind constructed a reality where the act made sense? The answer would determine whether she spent the rest of her life in prison or somewhere else entirely. In 2006, Andrea Yates returned to court. The charges were the same, the facts were unchanged. 5 children had died in their home in Houston. Their mother had admitted to killing them. The sequence, the timeline, the physical evidence, all of it remained intact. But the focus of the trial had shifted. This time, the court moved more carefully through her mental history. The earlier error in testimony had already changed the course of the case. Now both sides approached the central question with more precision. Was she legally insane at the time of the killings? The prosecution again argued that Andrea understood right from wrong. They pointed to her actions after the incident, the phone call to 911, the call to her husband, her decision to wait for police. They maintained that these actions showed awareness, control, a recognition that what she had done was against the law. The defence returned to her psychiatric condition. They presented a deeper examination of her medical records, her hospitalisations, her diagnoses, the repeated warnings from doctors, postpartum psychosis, severe depression, delusional thinking. They emphasised how her beliefs had evolved in the months leading up to the killings. According to expert testimony, Andrea's thoughts had become fixed around religious themes: punishment, failure, damnation. She believed she was a bad mother. She believed her children were not safe, and in her own statements, she described the act as a way to protect them from something worse. This time, those statements were given more weight, not as justification, but as evidence of how she perceived reality. Psychiatrists for the defence explained how psychosis can alter judgment. A person may appear calm, they may speak clearly, they may follow a sequence of actions, but their understanding of reality can still be fundamentally distorted. That distinction became critical because the law does not require confusion. It requires a lack of understanding of right and wrong. The prosecution challenged that interpretation. They argued that her structured behaviour suggested awareness, that the methodical nature of the act pointed to intent, that her ability to describe what she had done indicated comprehension. Again, the jury was faced with 2 interpretations of the same facts. The same actions, the same timeline, but 2 different conclusions about what those actions meant. As the trial progressed, the earlier testimony from the first trial was no longer part of the case. The non-existent television episode was gone. The focus remained on verifiable evidence: medical records, expert analysis, documented behaviour. Outside the courtroom, public opinion remained divided. Some believed the outcome of the first trial had been a mistake. Others believed the legal standard should not change. The case continued to raise questions that did not have simple answers. When the jury began deliberations, the decision carried weight beyond the case itself. It would define how the law interpreted severe mental illness in a situation where the facts were not disputed. The verdict came in 2006, not guilty by reason of insanity. The decision did not mean the acts had not occurred. It did not mean the case was dismissed. It meant that the jury concluded Andrea Yates was not legally responsible at the time of the killings due to her mental state. Instead of prison, she was committed to a state psychiatric hospital in Texas, a secure facility, not a release, not freedom, but treatment. In the years that followed, Andrea remained institutionalised. Her condition continued to be monitored. Evaluations were conducted periodically to assess whether she could ever be released. Reports indicated that she continued to experience severe mental illness, including symptoms consistent with schizophrenia and ongoing psychosis. At various points, she was considered for transfer to less restrictive conditions, but she remained under care. In some accounts, she chose to stay in treatment rather than pursue release. Rusty Yates divorced Andrea in 2004 before the retrial concluded. He later remarried. Over time, he spoke publicly about the case, about mental illness, about the warnings that had been given. He maintained that Andrea had been severely ill, that what happened inside the house was not the result of anger or intent in the conventional sense, but the result of a condition that had not been fully controlled. The case left a lasting impact. It changed how postpartum mental illness was discussed in the public sphere. It brought attention to the risks of postpartum psychosis, a condition that, while rare, can have severe consequences if untreated or misunderstood. It also raised questions about responsibility, where it begins, where it ends, and how the legal system should respond when mental illness is involved. There were also questions about prevention. Andrea had been hospitalised multiple times. She had attempted suicide. Doctors had issued warnings. She should not be left alone with the children. That warning had been documented. And yet, on the morning of June 20th, 2001, there was a window, about an hour, no supervision, no interruption. That hour became the point where everything changed. Looking back at the full timeline, there are no missing pieces in terms of what happened. The sequence is known, the evidence is clear, the legal outcome is established. But the questions remain, not about the act, but about the path that led to it. Could it have been prevented? Were the warning signs acted on strongly enough? Did the system respond in time? Andrea Yates remains in a psychiatric facility in Texas. Her case is reviewed periodically, as required by law. Decades have passed since the events inside that house, but the case continues to be studied, not because it is unsolved, but because of what it reveals about mental illness, about responsibility, and about how close intervention can come without arriving in time. There is a reason cases like this continue to be examined long after the verdict, not for resolution, but for understanding, because the difference between awareness and illness, between intent and delusion, is not always visible on the surface, and in this case, that difference defined everything. The house on Beachcomber Lane no longer holds the same life it once did, but the timeline that unfolded inside it remains one of the most studied in modern true crime, not for mystery, but for the clarity of what happened, and the uncertainty of how it was allowed to happen at all.